If you are under the age of 25, here's an assumption I've already made about you. Sometime throughout this afternoon, you're probably going to look at your phone to see your TikTok, Instagram, or your messages. Maybe you're trying to plan your Saturday night, or maybe you're bored and scrolling through TikTok. But let me explain TikTok. It is an app with seemingly limitless videos under 60 seconds. This constant stream of instant gratification is what attracts Gen Zers like me. But TikTok is not just trendy dances and funny videos. It has become a catalyst for Gen Z's ability to make connections. There is something for everyone, whether it be politics, art, music, history, or just humor. But one genre of TikToks in particular is queer content. The queer hashtag has 10 billion views, and the LGBTQ hashtag has over 100 billion views. There's a mix of content under these hashtags, but one thing is strikingly similar when scrolling through them. The Gen Z community has been able to form an international community that educates and inspires the history of the queer community. But to understand more about queer communities and their importance, let's go back in history. Picture it, 1950s San Francisco. Post-war, baby boomers, televisions, poodle skirts, and Elvis. It was a time of change in the United States. The civil rights movement was just starting, the sexual revolution following, and counterculture on its heels. But in the cracks of these major movements, queer individuals started to come out of the shadows. In particular, gay men from San Francisco wanted to create a safe space for people like themselves. At the time, it was very taboo to be gay, homosexuality was still considered a disease, and no one was really out and open about their sexuality in public. Out of this struggle, the Mattachine Society arose. White gay men in San Francisco came together to educate others and share their experiences of being gay at the time. The original group went from 8 to hundreds of members. Not only did they start newspapers, strike protests, and educate the public, they disrupted the status quo, not just in San Francisco, but nationwide. So, you might be wondering, what in the world does a group of gay men from the 50s have anything to do with teenagers on social media in 2022? Well, the communities on TikTok happen to follow the principles of the Mattachine Society to a T. The first principle of the Mattachine Society is to unify homosexuals isolated from their own community. Back in the 50s, it was difficult to find a community to support you without outing yourself or endangering your freedom. Today, the threat in the US generally isn't as severe. When people are outed, they fear not being supported by their family, or worse, not being supported financially or being kicked out. What TikTok provides is community through anonymity. When you make an account on TikTok, you're able to be hidden behind a profile photo and a username. No one has to know about it unless you tell them. So, TikTok has been providing a safe space for queer individuals to not only learn about their history, but to explore their own identity. The next principle of the Mattachine Society is to educate homosexuals and heterosexuals towards an ethical homosexual culture. An important theory to mention when talking about this principle is contact theory. The goal of contact theory is that under appropriate circumstances, prejudice can be reduced by minority and majority group members. This theory was first put into play during desegregation. Psychologists thought that if white people lived and worked alongside black people, having day-to-day experiences would help humanize them, would help humanize the black people to the white people, and in turn would lead to acceptance. What TikTok provides is that it provides a community. Through this, people are able to interact on a level that they are all equal. When you go on an app like TikTok, there are no preconceived notions of privileged identities. A video isn't popular because someone looks a certain way or is a certain way. The videos are popular because they're interesting. So, when someone who might be heterosexual or cisgender sees a funny or relatable video about queer life, they're more likely to understand and appreciate a queer person's history and struggle. But let's switch it up. From living rooms to nightclubs. Historically, another safe space for queer people is gay and lesbian bars and nightclubs. Queer people go to these spaces to be around other queer people. The notion of the closet is left at the door. However, recently, the amount of lesbian bars in the US has decreased expeditiously. In the 1980s, there were 200 lesbian bars in the US. Today, there are 21 lesbian bars left. In my hours of scrolling through TikTok, I came across 3 New York City friends who are traveling across the country to interview the last workers, managers, and regulars at these bars. And I found one thing in common about every episode of the podcast. Less and less people are coming to the bars. So, for one reason could be that it might be COVID and people don't want to go out. But I think the more likely reason is that queer people are starting to identify less with strong labels like lesbian or woman that a lesbian bar imposes on people going there. Where TikTok comes in is that there are so many communities online that people don't have to feel restricted to a certain label. So, TikTok has been able to outcompete places like a gay and lesbian bar because it is more accepting and there are more communities for people to relate to. But I get it. Now you might be thinking, oh my gosh, social media is taking over and we're never going to meet people again in person like we used to in the old days. But not so fast. I think that this emergence of social media allowing for queer people to have safe spaces is going to be the way of the future. In recent memory, the Black Lives Matter movement has used social media to catalyze their movement. They used it to educate people, strike protests, and gain traction on political movement. The queer community has used this and can continue to use this. In the past few weeks, the Florida governor has signed the Don't Say Gay bill. Through social media, information about protests that have been happening statewide have gone international. These very successful school walkouts have gotten attention on every corner of the world. So, if we continue to use these platforms to our advantage, we can use them to not just educate, but also lead to further acceptance. So, what does this emergence of social media helping to catalyze social justice movements going to look like? Well, we're not just going to be able to connect Gen Zers, but we are also going to educate and possibly further queer liberation. We've seen this in other movements like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement. These movements might not have gotten started or been as big without the help of social media. So, I think that we've seen a lot of what social media can do for these social justice movements, but the best is yet to come.